Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Player Driven Podcast. Today, we have a really fun episode where we're going to be talking about user generated content and modding. Can you believe that Baldur's Gate 3, which has been out for over a year now, recently has hit over 50 million mod downloads, and this was about 2 months ago, using user generated content to help engage more players and get more people involved in the creative process. And I'm really excited to be talking to someone that helping enable this process. Today, we are talking to Scott Reismanis from mod.io. He has a really cool background with UGC and all just modding in general. And I'm really excited to be talking more about this and learning more about this so we can talk more about it. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you? Is there anything you want to talk about yourself?
Hey, Greg, great to be here and very nice to meet you and your audience. So a bit about my background, which you sort of touched on. I've been in modding now for over 2 decades. I launched moddb.com way back in 2002 because, like many of us, I just loved the creativity and everything that the playing community was doing. At the time, I played a lot of first-person shooter games, your Dooms, your Quakes, your Half-Lives, and your Unreal Tournaments of the world, as well as a lot of RTS, StarCraft, Warcraft, and Age of Empires, and Command and Conquer. And I I really went deep into that whole creator scene. I realized that I couldn't mod myself when I failed miserably at making a Doom level. But what I did realize is I had a real passion for connecting people and sort of enabling and creativity and sharing. And selfishly, I wanted a destination in place where I could find amazing mods and content that was being made because the internet was quite a different world in 2002, and so ModDB was born as a way to sort of bring all those passions together. I guess that's still running today, and excited to talk about the topic with you more, Greg.
Yeah, I'm fascinated that you're not the one creating mods, or at least when you started, you weren't creating mods, right? You saw a need in the marketplace when you were playing your games, right? Was there a specific game? I know you said a whole bunch of FPSs and RTS games, but was there one that was just like, I need this?
Well, for me, it was always it was always Half Life. Like many, like Counter Strike was probably the real eye opener. But back then, you had Counter Strike, Team Fortress, Day of Defeat, Natural Selection. Like there was just so many incredible mods been made for that title, and total conversions. In fact, like it was really the no, you didn't really have good access to engines, and you had source code access. You had the editor and everything else, and so people were able to make really amazing things. But I guess what blows my mind about modders is just the ability to pick up someone else's bit of technology that isn't necessarily well documented. Requires a very diverse set of skills from sort of design and 3D work through to 2D HUDs to programming and pathfinding and everything else for all the characters and the NPCs as well as the player and animations. For me, it was just mystifying. It was too much, and as much as I am an engineer and developer, sticking to 2D HTML and CSS and JavaScript was enough.
So let's talk about mods. I think mods, I remember maybe it was 15 years ago, I got Skyrim on my Xbox 360, and a number of years later, Bethesda opened up modding to consoles, and I think that was mind blowing for a lot of console players because usually mods were reserved for the PC players, and all of a sudden it's enabled a whole new set of people to create content for players who are playing on console. And I think that's such a cool experience. It improves the engagement, improves the retention because players are coming back. Um, you mentioned, or it was mentioned online that 1.7 million mods were downloaded in the first 24 hours of console launch, which is Baldur's Gate 3, which is awesome. That means the audience was excited for it. They were hungry for it. Why is it such a game changer? What was the biggest hurdle in making it happening?
Uh, I mean, I think really, in many ways, the challenge on console has always been that they're closed ecosystems, right? Like they're not. It's not like PC, which is very open. There's certification and there's security checks, and there's all these other sort of systems that consoles require games to go through before shipping. And so those systems, unfortunately, meant that just modding was not possible in those worlds. Having said that, uh, one of the reasons I think that PC has been seeing year on year growth now for many, many, many years, whereas a lot of the other platforms are potentially going in the other direction, is because the modern consumer is growing up, expecting more from their games. Like studios really want to connect more deeply with their players and everything else. So having modern consoles really embrace that has been absolutely amazing. Like we now work closely with PlayStation, Xbox, and also Nintendo for the Switch. I think across each of those systems we have 20 plus games live, and as we saw with Baldur's Gate, we also saw it with Skater XL, SnowRunner, Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, like a wide range of games. All of those players, almost none of them, realize that modding is possible when it comes, goes live in their favorite title, and so there's always this insane reception, and it's even dwarfed PC gamers, which has surprised me. Like they're consuming more content than the PC counterparts. Um, there's just like the positivity on socials where it's like holy cow, thank you so much. Like this is the best thing ever. I love making my character's hair green, like whatever it is, even the most simple content, right through to the really advanced ones, where it's like amazing. I've now got 20 vehicles in my garage in SnowRunner. It's just been really, really, really encouraging and motivating for us. And really, it was probably the major thing that led to the formation of Mod.io, and that is modding is fantastic. We think it's going to continue to grow and continue to be more impactful. And Steam Workshop is an amazing product at doing integrated and accessible modding for Steam players. How can we expand on that and make it possible for console users, non-Steam users, even mobile users, VR players? And so, really, that was the foundation. And then, of course, there's another 20 plus ideas we want to explore. But it's been really, really encouraging to see the Baldur's Gate community, and others like that, like Dying Light and others, just respond so positively to it. And we can't wait to continue. We've got a lot of games behind the scenes, so we're going to make this happen for as well.
Yeah, following you on LinkedIn and in the news, right? More and more games are adopting this. They're seeing the success that all these games are having with this generated content. Going back to the original question, was when you kind of came up with this idea when you were younger, did you see this coming into a business? You basically saw a need in the market for you wanting to download all your mods in a single place, but did you see that blowing up to where you are today?
And definitely not. And I've got a perfect story for that. And that is when I founded ModDB, it was purely a hobby. And in some ways, it was a selfish hobby because I made it because I was inspired by Internet Movie Database, IMDb, and that's a location where you can go to find reviews for all your favorite movies. I'm like, you know what? I want to create a location where I can go to play all my favorite mods. I was at the time having to search across File Planet and FileFront and all of these other various websites, and finding mods in a consistent and reliable way to play was kind of challenging. And so ModDB selfishly was a way for me to encourage the community to all submit to a location that I could then browse and download and play. And so that was the original, that was it. Like the motivation back then was I wanted to play this content. And my friends wanted to play it, and we loved consuming it at LANs and just trying heaps of different game modes and ideas out to see what really stuck and resonated with us. But of course, what happens is when you do something, when you're solving a need, as we were, I guess the business opportunity kind of follows because naturally there was a lot of other people that shared my same passion and desire, and all of a sudden, within a couple of years, ModDB had millions and millions of monthly visitors that were coming to download content for the same games that I loved, and asking for a lot more. And there were games that they were playing that I wasn't playing, and things that we started adding to the site, and the modding and creative community just kept growing and growing. And really, the catalyst for it becoming a business was IGN reached out. and this is going way back to 2006. And they said, "Hey, we're interested in modding. You know, it was already a big part of File Planet and Planet Half Life and all their various sites. Can we, acquire ModDB from you?" I went and visited them, and they made an offer. Ultimately, I didn't accept the offer. And ModDB was not making any revenue at that time. It was purely a hobby. But I thought, look, if they see a business and an opportunity here, then there must be something here. And so I quit my job and took a huge risk and spent the next few years growing ModDB. It was probably the best decision I made, because naturally that's led to mod.io, and it's really been a defining part of my journey. I'm still excited 20 years on for what's coming next. Like, I still think we've barely scratched the surface.
That is such a cool story. I mean, I imagine you're basically a kid. You are a kid 20 years ago. You get a call from IGN, right? When you're a kid back then, the internet wasn't as huge as it is now, right? IGN is the staple video game website there, and they want to acquire your passion project that you're building that's making no money, and you still had the balls, for lack of better word, to be like, no, you know what? If you see this, there's something there and you want to go in it. And I just love the courage it takes to just kind of follow that dream. You had an out, but you said, no, you know what? I want to keep going higher. And that's truly shows your love and dedication for it, right? It's not just a business. This is a true passion project that you're building out. And I think that's so cool.
No, I really appreciate that. And yes, it was. IGN was enormous. They owned half of the gaming sites on the planet at the time, and they, even after I turned them down, when attempted to make a competitor. So, it was a big decision. But yeah, when you believe in something, you got to go for it.
So I want to talk about UGC in general and kind of the developer and the business side of it, right? Uh,
Mm.
User generated content has the ability to create additional revenue streams for your game. You've been talking about a 23% increase in consumer spending for companies that are leveraging UGC. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how this does enable those additional revenue streams, and what's the risk, if any, to developers for incorporating stuff like this?
Yeah, so UGC is really interesting because anecdotally, the evidence is really strong to suggest it creates really great success. Because if you look at the most enduring brands in gaming, there's a very high chance that there's a strong UGC element. Either it's still strong today, or it was very strong in their formative years where they really built their audience and reputation. Um, and so, when I talk about Half Life as an example of the game that motivated me to start, and was the very first game listed on ModDB, they just released the Valve just released a massive modding update, and 50,000 concurrent users returned to the game. And that title, is probably, it's half our age, if not more. Like, it's phenomenal how strong it is and can be over a very long journey. So the business, but it's all anecdotal. But the business case for UGC, and so we wanted to try to put actual real numbers behind this anecdotal evidence, and so it's not just UGC is good because it creates connected ecosystems, players, and community and creativity and things like the content side. What does it actually achieve for studios? And so we work with Simon Carlis from Game Discover Co. newsletter. If you're not subscribed, it's a fantastic industry analysis newsletter where he looks at all of the trends on all the various platforms and analyzes various things and what they do. And through Simon, we said, hey, can you research the topic of UGC and the impact it's had on the industry, using Steam data over a 5-year period with like 1,000+ games, so that we could get a really good cross section of the industry. And so Simon went away with his data analysts and sort of looked at a normalized version of games without UGC, and looked at a normalized versions of games with UGC to compare the difference. And using the metrics that they've estimated from the Steam data that's available, they were sort of able to determine a bunch of things. And the key ones, really, it massively exceeded our own expectations. But the key ones were, one, as you said, 23% more revenue over that 5-year time frame appeared to occur for the games from UGC. So that's material, like a quarter more revenue. Like that's quite incredible to consider that UGC can sort of create that. Two, when trying to determine the reason for that revenue, I mean, there's probably a lot of things that you can attribute to it. Um, but the main one was the CCU, like the average CCU count of players over that time frame, was 90% higher in the games that you see than those without. So they retain close to twice as many players as titles without that equivalent, I guess, content, cycle and sort of flywheel that that community is providing. And then finally, probably the other, I guess, the counterpoint to all of this is um, what if I and a lot of studios ask us this: if I add free content in this UGC community to my title, yeah, I want that sort of engagement for my live service game, but isn't this going to compete with my business model of content updates and DLC and season passes? So we did our best to explore that question. While the data on Steam is a little bit hard to estimate the changes, I think the median showed that at the low end, you still see a 4% uplift in those sales. And at the high end, you see like a 26% uplift. So UGC even helps sell through of DLC. And that's, I suspect, because you have a larger player base to sell through. And we have talked to partners like Saber and Focus and SnowRunner, who's been one of the longest games on mod.io and has us on pretty much every platform under the sun, about what what they want to reveal and share, and they validated that story. Like they said that modding in their title has allowed it to go for 13 seasons, where if it didn't have all that content from the community been made in between those passes, maybe it wouldn't have been viable to continue shipping such for such a long period of time. And so that's amazing validation, like, and so good for them. So I think it's been good to put some of that anecdotal evidence that free modding can have a real strong commercial impact. But of course, there's obviously more than that for UGC. Like there's other areas that you can pursue to create opportunity, and we see that in Fortnite and Roblox and Minecraft and Flight Simulator and Counter Strike that all have sort of various versions of creator economies enabled within their games.
Do you think, I mean, are there actually still studios out there that are looking at UGC as potential competition for their own developers? Or do you think we're at a time where people have kind of embraced it and taken a look at it and say, hey, you know what? A lot of people like this car that they're downloading in this game. Maybe we should look to create some content pack for that.
I don't think they see it as competition, um, but they see it as we already have a really good go to market motion, and we don't necessarily we know what we're doing. We know what the returns are. The returns are good. And so let's not rock the apple cart. And so that's why I think you still don't see UGC in free to play games, even though I'd almost say it feels like the perfect fit, right? Because they're live service, they're all about player engagement and retention. And you would assume that, hey, adding UGC, like that's what it's really strong at. It's really good at community and connectivity and everything else. But those games have a really big, content team. They have a proven way of doing business. UGC is a bit of an unknown and potentially a risk, and so it hasn't really emerged there. So I think they don't really the engagement is so critical. Like we're in the attention economy right now. It is so hard to get like Fortnite is just trying to become bigger, a bigger and bigger and bigger Goliath, and does such a good job of serving, I guess, so many different needs of its playing community, that studios, I think, kind of almost need to consider, do they have to do that to probably survive in the modern economy? But yeah, like there's very big pockets of the industry where it still doesn't exist.
Yeah, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of a change there. And maybe not, I say that, but I think about like games that are typically locked down, but you see Cyberpunk has some sort of DLC built into it. Again, Baldur's Gate, right? I feel like there might be genres that are off limits to DLC, but it doesn't seem like that's really the case anymore. It seems like even single player games are starting to embrace this a little more, and I think it's good because I think it's going to continue the engagement, continue players coming into to what you said earlier, right? Like players probably like to see what they create and see people using it, so they're going to keep coming back and they're going to keep coming back, and I think it gives these games such legs that they haven't had before, and they can keep them running for years and years. I mean, you mentioned at some point that over 2,000 mods have already been created for Baldur's Gate 3, and it's been out for a little over 2 months now at this point, right? Like, that's nuts. People must have been itching for this, waiting for this. I mean, this game's gonna be
Yeah,
relevant for years. It's seen player over player growth from last year to this year, and last year was the game of the year. So I mean, I think this is an amazing thing you've created for the community. Obviously, the community is creating it for themselves as well, but I think you're helping enable that. And I think that's awesome.
yeah. I think I absolutely, it is really changing. And we see that firsthand. We have the benefit of seeing it. Um, and a lot of that, unfortunately, I can't share, but there's some amazing things. But the ones that are public, for example, is like we worked with Ubisoft for Anno for the 25th anniversary of that title. And I'm not sure that they've really done UGC in any game ever before. And they wanted to give something back to the community. And so we released it, and the reception on Reddit and elsewhere was just overwhelmingly positive. They're like, "Thank you, devs. This is incredible. Like this is one of the greatest features. It's never been so easy. Like it's amazing." And so that's that's a major AAA studio that has thought, we'd like to dive into UGC more. I mean, Andrew Wilson at EA has been talking on their investor calls for a while now the importance of creation within their future and things. So, there was a point in time where Battlefield 2 was the most influential game on ModDB if we go back, 12, 15 years, and it had some of the most incredible mods because you could create these 256 player, like these massive sort of scale engagements through it that no other game really could do. Um, but Battlefield really hasn't had UGC back in it for a very long time, but now they're starting, like there is UGC sort of, back in Battlefield, and I suspect, they're looking at their other franchises in the same way. So I think for the players, like that should be really exciting. Like that these massive studios are acknowledging how important it is for their survival and opportunity and future growth, and I think it's going to deliver massively for them and for the community.
From the developer side, what's it like implementing Mod IO? Right? Is it are they overseeing everything? Are you just the framework? Like, my next question is going to go into kind of this gray zone. How do you prevent cheaters? How do you prevent bad content? Right. But the question is, where does that responsibility sit? Right. Is it on the studio itself?
Yeah, so I'll tackle this in two parts because one of them is just the implementation, which is sort of almost the development side, and then one is the operation, which is sort of the grey area that you were describing. So if we look at the first part, uh, integration, really the first step for a studio is how do I make my game moddable? And that is what sort of content do we want the playing community to be able to make? Are they making skins and emotes and liveries, like, more sort of cosmetic and simple sort of content? Are they making levels and, new worlds to explore? Or are we going to allow them to go to really deep and almost create total conversions and things which bring new gameplay and elements in? So the first thing for the studios to solve is that part of the equation. Um, Historically, we haven't really helped with that because it's a very personal game design decision. Like, what do you want your community to do? What do you want to see? That's game development work and gameplay work to make that all run and work easily. We do help a lot more now because one of the common traps that we see on engines like Unity and Unreal is studios will work, build in mod support in a way that doesn't work on consoles because consoles can't quite work in the same way as PC. You can't sideload content, you can't load DLLs, you can't run scripts, you can't overwrite and move files around. So you have to think a little bit more about your modding loading structure to ensure that you have that console compatibility, which is so important today. So we do help studios a little bit, but ultimately that's the first thing they need to solve. But once they've solved that, the actual mod.io side, like we're getting better and better and better at onboarding games, at plugins. Like we provide a plugin for Unity, Unreal, and custom engine titles. And those plugins now feature what we call a component UI. which is a very modular, unopinionated framework for changing the look and feel and the layout of how consumers will access content in game. So you can get a much higher quality, bespoke, very personalized version of Baldur up and running. And we always say to companies, you'll get that prototype running in anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks. Like you will have that mod content distributing through your title in a very short time frame. It's the polish and the going through the console compliance and setting up all of the authentication systems where there's a bit more nitty gritty to kind of work through. But ultimately, like studios do get Mod.io up and running with 1 to 2 engineers in anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, and then there's a little bit of extra time depending on what you want to change and do differently. And our team helps throughout that process. We'll set up a Slack channel behind the scenes and we'll be available for questions and things to do it. So on the technical side, I feel like we'll get a really good grip and we're getting better and better and better. And our tooling is getting better and better. Our dashboards and our documentation is. And we have a lot of great games onboarding now without even talking to our team through mod.io, which any studio listening today could go and experiment and do. So that's that side. I'll stop for a minute in case you want to ask some questions about the operations and the grey side, but otherwise I can carry on with that thought.
My my only question would be, I guess, you get approval from the consoles, right? I know when you release a true DLC, Microsoft's got to sign off on it, PlayStation's got to sign off on it, or whatever. They got to go through the approval of the store. Once mod.io is approved by again, I know it's not you being approved, it's the game being approved, right? At that point, it's almost like, all right, we got approved for the modding stuff. Anyone could submit stuff now, right? It's like basically, I'm not gonna say an open door, right? But it allows them the flexibility of basically releasing stuff at a quicker pace than if it was official. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's accurate.
Yeah, it does, and that's probably the most amazing thing because right now every game update that gets shipped onto a console platform goes through a certification process that takes time and money. Whereas modding is a feature that once permitted and you've got your approach greenlit, doesn't need to really go through certification at that point. The studios are allowed to send content through that pipeline and live into their game immediately. The major caveat here is that each studio that does console modding, we're not privy to this, but they will talk to their Sony or their Microsoft representative or their Nintendo representative, and they will say, "We want to have UGC as a feature in our game. We think it's going to be really powerful. Here's how it's going to work." And Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo will say to that studio, "That's fantastic. We're really excited for this. Hopefully, they'll say Mod.io is a great partner, and you should be talking to them about it because they've done it with a lot of games." But here's the rules that we need to ensure that you follow because that content isn't going to go through a traditional certification loop. And so they might say no scripting, no shaders, and other things. But provided the studio follows those rules and can design their system or sandbox it in a way that meets whatever requirements there are and gets a sign off. Once they've done that, it's amazing. Like, yeah, you can now let your creator community create and release onto platforms and follow the pre-described rules in place. So yes, there are some sort of little barriers there, but I can say that the all the platforms that we're working with are seeing fantastic results from UGC. Like they're seeing really good player engagement and passion around it and response on socials. And that's really important for their business. So they've been very active in working with us on what are best practices and how can we allow studios to do more and more and streamline this process and get it better and stronger. And to their credit, we've been 100% taking active steps, month on month, year on year, to continue to do that. And so, yeah, like these days, it's the number one reason that studios talk to us for sure.
So I love that because you get the approval, you got to stay within your boundaries, you get the approval from Microsoft or PlayStation or Nintendo because They don't want to be the only console out there without modding, because then all of a sudden people are going to go play the game on another console. So that comes into the kind of that gray zone, right? How does the developer themselves oversee the content that's being submitted?
Yeah, so there's a again, it's one of those things where there's a bunch of different ways that it's been done historically. There's best practice, and then there's what studios want to do. Um, so at mod.io, we've got like a four layered system to sort of help with content management. So there's the automated layer. So every time a piece of content comes into the system, it runs through all these automated checks, and that's looking, at the content itself, the images, the words, the metadata attached to it. Um, does it pass various checks? We also have a system we call the rules engine, which allows studios to plug in their own checks and things that they might want to do to validate the schema, to scan that content. We also scan it, for malware and these sorts of things. So there's the automated side of it that occurs, and we're looking at how can we continue to strengthen that? How can we use AI to identify, does it contain adult themes or whatever it might be, to try to um, at least pre-moderate and manage as much content as possible. That's step one. That's layer one. Layer two is really, and sorry, layer one is the automated part that we have. The layer two is sort of the rules engine the studios can define, which again is still automated. So the layer three is really the curation, and studios can control how they want this to work. And the curation is um, what checks does that content need to go through to go live, and in some games where you're making that content using an in-game editor, and it's all very sandboxed and sanctioned, that content may go live immediately, because it's like a save file, right? Like, it'd be very weird to say save files need to go through a moderation check. So that content goes live immediately. Um, because of the design of that game. But then you also have games where it's like, no, our content is made in Blender. It requires 3D assets. It requires, all this weird and, complex creation processes external to the game using external editors. And in which case, with the first party platform like the consoles, or just with that studio's own quality controls, they're like, no, we want to check and approve each content to make sure that it's compatible with the game, it doesn't cause crashes, it follows our acceptable use policy and content guidelines. And in which case, through mod.io, they can turn on those settings, so they can choose how strict it is. Like, are they checking everything? Are they checking only certain platforms? And various things. And then that just populates a queue behind the scenes that they see, all right, this is all the content. Their moderators and community managers need to approve that content. And the best practice and the best studios actually use this requirement as a way to excite and engage their audience by saying, all right, let's try to do this on a schedule. Like every week, let's drop new content from the community. And then that gives their playing community a reason each week to re-engage with their title, and they leverage that through their socials and their marketing channels to make that curation flow really strong for their title. And then the final thing is, once that content is live, it's the discovery systems and community reporting. So the discovery systems it's all about servicing the best content, not the wrong content, and how do we continue to improve those algorithms. And the community reporting stuff is, and this is a requirement of all platforms and mod.io, that you must make all content reportable at all times. This allows rights holders and allows players to flag content as, this is my content, it shouldn't be up here, in which case we will take action and remove it. Or it's like, this content is not working for me, in which case the creator can be made aware of that and can fix that content. So there's sort of like the fully automated, the curated, and then the reactive sort of community-based moderation. Like, they're the key layers that we put in place to try to create and encourage a healthy ecosystem of content. And then it's the studio's own guidelines. And then it's, do they want us to apply and enforce those rules for them? Or do they want to be, close and connected to their community and drive their own dashboards? We give them the option of both. Like, we see our role as, like, where we see ourselves being unique is we are the service provider. We don't want to, we provide recommendations and best practice, but we don't necessarily want to prescribe. If a studio wants to do something a particular way, we want to support it, make it as good as we possibly can, and then get out of the way and let them do that. And so, as much as possible, we try to live that sort of ethos.
I really like how you, I mean, I know it's up to their strategy, but I love the idea that you could basically create like a drip marketing content release with all this stuff coming in, right? If you get a lot of users creating this content and you want to put it out slowly, so it's not like a all hits you at once type of thing, you can create this, you create a crazy longevity to the game, right? By saying, hey, every week we're going to release a new update, like, and it's user created content. I think that's such a great way to keep things fresh, keep people logging in. I mean, I've been playing a lot of Call of Duty recently, and it seems like every time I turn it on, there's an update and something new that I'm just like, all right, what's new now? And you kind of go searching through the menus for what's new. So I love how you're enabling these studios to have the ability to do that if they're putting that content in their games.
Yeah, it's actually awesome for the creators too, because as much as I think everyone wants their content to go live, it brings attention to it. It's like, oh man, what's new this week? Oh, amazing! I'm going to try that out.
In the world, I mean, I don't know if mod.io, do you have your own little community, but like, are there top creators that create across all the games?
Uh, there are very, very, very talented creators out there that do create content through a variety of different systems. But we've polled creators a lot of times. Like we've said, hey, what is your motivating force for creation? Um, and the vast majority, it's for the love of the game. And when it's for the love of the game, you're modding content for the game that you're playing because you almost see yourself more as a creator and not a consumer. And that's what we always say to studios too. Like the beauty of modding is that you're unlocking the full potential of your entire audience because your consumers are getting more content to play, and your creators and your creative people have an outlet, for that creativity. And so the answer there is that like if I'm making mods for Baldur's Gate, I'm not going to necessarily be like, oh, I'm going to suddenly just start making mods for SnowRunner because I can, and it's also on mod.io. Like that's just it's just not how they think. It's the game that they're playing in that moment, and they're loving and enjoying in the moment that they're engaging with and modding for. Um, so the that cross pollination is certainly important, and it's really important that we have a really strong relationship with creators, the studios that work with us. We can help give them a really accelerated head start and connection, and we've got all these systems like preview systems and betas and ways in which we really events and promotions and other means in which we can really help them connect with that creator community, seed their initial content, and hit the ground running with some amazing sample mods and stuff for their players to consume, and then massively build on that base. Like we really consider that a strength, and it's a really key focal point for us. But at the same time, creators they're like their motivating force is varied, and it's the game is a key component for that of that, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, like it's basically passion of the game is the fuel that kind of creates great content. A true player really knows what they want to add, and I love how you put that.
One thing I'll add to that though, just quickly, if you don't mind, is that there's a big push right now towards democratization of creation. And I think it's valid. Like if you're creating a game like Super Mario Maker, you want it to be easy. Like the whole point of the game is creation. So you don't want it to be hard to make content, like you want everyone to be able to make and share. Um, but when you look at Baldur's Gate 3 or other titles that we've got live, like they have probably 10 million plus, north of 10 million players, and they've got all this incredible content. You only need a very small percentage of your audience to actually be modders to create, a really impactful material thing. Like their top mods have millions of downloads at this point, have been loved and enjoyed by many, many, many people. That's coming from a smaller subset of their community. So they're a very small but mighty group, and you don't have to democratize creation. You just have to enable imagination, really. Um, like so yeah, a lot can be done with a small and passionate player base. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's in a similar way with all these new AI tools coming out. It allows the imagination of people to kind of do some crazy stuff and create some crazy content. But you kind of start to learn that just because I can make something creative with AI doesn't mean it's special, right? And I think when you're a true player of a game and you truly love a game, right, there's that, again, that passion inside of you that you know exactly what to create, how it works, the way
Mm,
it fits in. Like, it's hard to put into words, but like, I always tell people to keep playing around with AI, but it's very obvious when people just copy and paste AI stuff into whatever it is because it looks it, it feels it. It doesn't have that human element. But when you
mm,
have someone that's passionate about it, creating a mod, even if it's again a small subset of users, that like the fact that they're taking the time to build a mod for a game, and maybe I'm sure people create crap mods. We've all been there. We've all played them before, right? But like those ones that are special because they care. They put that love and feel into it. And I think it's important. And Mario Maker is a great example because anyone can make a level in Mario Maker, right? I remember messing around with stuff, and you know what? At the end of the day, I suck at it. I just don't have that creativity side to actually make it
mm,
flow really well. But then you see some people that are building some crazy stuff out there. Like it's like a symphony, right? Everything just kind of sings when
mm.
you're playing it, when you know what they're doing. And I think it takes a special person to be able to create something like that. I think again, AI and tools will help you get there, but to make it sing is something that's special.
Yeah, you really feel the passion for sure. Completely agree with that sentiment.
From again, from the kind of public or the developer's perspective, what are some of the key metrics that studios should be looking at once they implement something like this?
I'd say the key metric is what percentage of their player base is engaging with UGC. And so, like Baldur's Gate recently talked about 40% of their player base engaging. Like, that's insane. That's very, very, very high. So if you're doing something like that, you're doing it very, very, very well. Um, the norm is probably closer to 20% or the like. So, like they're double the norm, which shows how insane their player base is. But so, what percentage of your players? How much content is each player consuming? Is the average user downloading one mod a month or eight mods a month? What sort of mods are they downloading? Like, I think one of the most amazing things about UGC is yes, it gives you content, yes, it gives you player engagement, but it also gives you insight. You can see what it is that your players want, and often it's not what you expect. Because I saw a great quote from a studio who's and this individual called Anton who's been working on this mobile title with UGC, and he said the best thing about UGC is that players will react to industry trends and memes and desires almost in real time. And that will get litmus tested and they'll see if it sticks and if the community really likes it and it resonates. If you have to wait for a studio to respond to something that's currently trending in the industry, you're waiting months or years for that to go through their development cycle and pipeline. And by that point, we've moved on to the next thing. And so the best thing actually is probably the insight. Like, it is, what is the type of content that peer players are consuming, and then finally, I think the most amazing thing, and I've heard this story so many times through ModDB and Mod.io, who are the most influential and top creators in my game, and should they be working for my company? Um, the amount of people who I've said, like, I've talked to, and they say, hey, through ModDB, I started creating games and I got my first job at X. And I'm like, it is the best thing you could possibly have on your resume. Like, the fact that you've shown the aptitude, the knowledge, the ability, the interest, the self motivation, and everything to be able to ship a mod. I think that's a phenomenal accomplishment, and it's a really strong validator for studios to then be like, you know what, we want to work with this person. So there's a lot of key metrics that are really important, as well as just purely consumption metrics, like the obvious ones. What has the most downloads, the most subscribers, is highest rated. Like, look a bit beneath the surface, and there's a lot of value there.
I think that goes for almost any industry, and I love how you brought. Hey, if you want to get into the industry and you can start modding, just start modding and throw it on your resume. Same thing with artists. If you want to be an artist, just start drawing. Put some stuff out there, right? Like,
Mm,
do it. Don't just talk about it. And I think doing it will show studios, will show anyone, not just studios, employers, that this person is hungry for this. They're willing to just do it. And I think that goes beyond school and education. It says, hey,
mm,
this person is working towards it. And I think that's a quality that everyone who's listening or everyone in general should just be doing. Like, if you're hungry for something, go get it. It's not going to come to you.
yeah, 100%.
Um, two quick, easier questions for you. What game are you playing now? And What is the most mind blowing mod you've seen?
Whoa, the most mind blowing mod I've seen. Wow, that's a good question. Um,
You can tell me something you came up with during Half Life.
not even remotely close. Um, I'm trying to think of like something obscure that no one's heard of because I've seen just so many amazing ones. Like one that's always stuck in my mind, um, and I really should know the name. This is it's just that I'm going back like 16 years, but this one just really stuck with me. And someone completely changed the rendering engine, I think for Unreal Tournament, but I might be wrong here. And they made it into papercraft. So like the characters were like paper animated, so they looked like paper, and I think they brought in like hand animation into the game, so the entire world was now like cardboard characters, but it looked really, really, really good. I'm not even sure if they ultimately shipped it, so I might be saying something here that you can't even play, and I'm way off base. But for whatever reason, that one's just stuck with me forever, and I think no one's probably ever heard of it. So I thought I'd give you a creative story rather than just probably answer in a more predictable way. Um,
We will try and
like
find it.
yeah. It's definitely on ModDB somewhere, and it may have never shipped. And I'd love to look at it now because maybe I'm like, geez, I was way off base. Um, but the game that's got me fascinated at the moment, just because I just want to learn, like motivating how different people play and react, and that is it's a title you won't even know. It's a VR title called Gorilla Tag. They launched on mod.io only a month ago. Um, and they're doing absolutely insane numbers. Like they're doing 200,000 plus UGC installs daily of these levels. It's played by a younger audience. You've got no legs; you just swing around in this VR space. Um, and so it's the reason why it's fascinating for me is just think that younger demographic. Like I think that the entire industry talks about Roblox because it's so significant. It's impossible not to, but no one plays it and really understands it. And so I really want to understand it because yes, I'd love to play, Baldur's Gate and Transport Fever and Dying Light. Like these are all the games that I know and familiar with and consume. And modding for that is really familiar, but I really want to get into the headspace of like things that I can't understand and experience it. So putting on the VR headset and just seeing this and seeing the content and how it's consumed and enjoyed is something that sort of I'm trying to make myself become more apt at.
It's awesome. And, I'm looking at your library of games, right? Gorilla Tag is first. I remember talking about it last time and checking it out. Like, I love that idea of like, hey, what are kids playing these days? Because, I know what I know, but like, what don't I know? What else is out there? And I think it's amazing.
They're what people won't know is they're 100-person studio. They're like enormous, like absolutely enormous, doing incredible things, and it's just yeah. So I think understanding that is super important.
So taking a look at kind of the games, right, that you guys support on our final question. My final question is going to be about kind of the future of UGC. Where's it going? But you're already in such amazing games like Gorilla Tag, like you mentioned, Baldur's Gate, Sins of a Solar Empire, Transport Fever, Dying Light, SnowRunner, Anno. There's so many cool games that if people are playing with mods, you may not even know that that's powered by mod.io. In this awesome creator content world where people are creating content, where do you see the industry going with UGC? Very loaded
Well,
question for the last one. I'm sorry.
no, absolutely fine. I think that there's going to be really, really significant change. Like, I believe that, I mean, the really big vision of mine is that we go through cycles, and we've gone through this cycle back in my day, like if I go back 20 years when I first started, where you didn't have access to engines and technology. And so, because you didn't have access to engines and technology, if you're an amateur or indie game creator and you wanted to make a content, you had to mod Half Life and StarCraft. That's how you had to make a game by modding one. Then Unity and Unreal kind of gave equal access to engines and technology that AAA studios have. So all these indie creators started shipping games using an indie Unreal, and total conversion mods have largely sort of faded away, and now they're sort of generally speaking more on the maps and the cosmetics, like the smaller scale of things. But I actually think that we're coming full circle now, um, which is really exciting to me. And that is, I think the hardest thing for an indie creator is access to an audience. Like there is so much content releasing through Steam and Xbox and iOS. You can make an incredible game, but then never rise above the noise that exists on those platforms, um, because it's just so competitive. And so, how do you create opportunity for yourself? And so, I think games that do an incredible job of enabling their creator community, um, they that in turn they then think about maybe the commercialized side of UGC, and that is how can they let their creators make a living out of this? And I think we'll see a fair bit more of that. And all of a sudden, you have a situation where if I'm an indie creator, rather than starting from scratch, I can make a triple A level quality game by modifying someone else's. I can ship it immediately to a large and engaged audience. I can run it. I can solve really complex technical problems like run it cross platform, um, and I can multiplayer and other systems that are really hard to operate and live service and scale and have cost. Like this game gives me the foundation for all of that, and I can do that and create a business for myself. I think that's really exciting. Like that's where I think UGC is heading, where these games become these amazing platforms for creations, and like that's what we want to unlock at Mod.io. We want to make that possible for studios to have a turnkey solution that enables them to pursue this opportunity, grows their game, grows their audience, grows the success of the commercial success of their title, and then can almost just become like this rolling snowball. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, as we've seen others that have done this well do. So I think that's a really significant change and shift that's going to happen over the next couple of years, because of what we're working really hard to do, and studios are really keen to do, because it's just they see it as so important for their success. They realize that that UGC is just fantastic at all their key metrics and the things that they value, and now they want to dig deeper than they probably historically have.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you're enabling new content to keep these games going, not just on PC anymore, but on console as well. And I think you're creating a win-win-win solution for both studios, players, and creators. You're giving them all access to a tool set where it, again, is a win for everyone, because the more they play the game, the more content creators get to strut their stuff, the more players are involved in having fun with this stuff. So I think you are enabling this next generation to use their imagination to build something awesome and be in a triple A game and get that
Mm.
notoriety of having that. So I think it is awesome. I think you guys are primed for success, and I loved your story from IGN trying to acquire you to just building out your passion project to being in the game of the year now. So congratulations to all that. Before we go, Scott, can you tell us where we can find you? And yeah.
Yes. Well, you can find me on social media at Scott Reismanis, if you can spell my name. LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn is the place to find me if you want to connect and talk about UGC strategy and theory for your own game. Very, very happy to shed knowledge at any point in time. Otherwise, we always love to attend GDC and Gamescom and all the major trade shows. That's always a fantastic point to reach out. I'm Scott at mod.io. So yeah, please don't hesitate. Love to chat and hear what you have in mind.
Yeah, we'll have links to Scott. We'll also have links to mod.io so you can check them out, see what's available there. Scott, I really appreciate your time and your patience with all this. It took us a while to connect because of everything that happened, but I appreciate this. And I've learned a lot about UGC. I think you guys are really creating something great, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. So thank you for your time today. It's early. Scott's all the way in Australia. So I hope you have a great day today, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you too, Greg. It's been an absolute pleasure talking about it. I've enjoyed it greatly.